Hello, Year 11, and welcome to your second lesson this January. We're getting used to this now, aren't we? What day was it yesterday?
It was January the 5th, which also is known as my birthday.
Miss O'Callaghan's birthday. And what did you get for your birthday that you liked?
Ooh. Anyway, my favourite thing that happened yesterday, my favourite gift of all, was the work that came through after the first lesson.
Yeah, me
Because
too,
it
actually.
really made me smile. And it was an absolute gift. Genuinely, I was so pleased to receive that really quickly. And there's some lovely, lovely contributions here that I'd like to share.
Go on then.
Okay. So one student sent this in to me. As residents began peeking out their windows on what was supposed to be the most normal Monday morning, they soon realised that overnight the glistening river had raged and burst from its water bank. The water had shifted from glossy and slick to a murky coffee colour. It had engulfed not only the surrounding patches of carefully trimmed down grass, but the stone streets and benches that had felt like home to many. That's only the beginning. Only the beginning. I've got another one. Just trying to open it on my phone. Where blue meets grey, light meets dark, contrast is created and constructs the beauty of an arced ray of light. Isn't it?
Lovely.
Some lovely use of the terminology and the vocabulary that we put together as well. I've got another one, somebody talking about the dark shadow of destruction, the handiwork of the dark shadow above, and this evil hand that comes down with the storm.
Lovely.
Really, really strong. And there are so many examples we could read, but we haven't got a lesson to deliver. Because anything you produce from now onwards and anything you produced in the past, we can use to try and put together a portfolio for you and determine what grade you would be likely to achieve in the summer.
Yeah, so this is good news and a good opportunity. So we're going to move on to the second part of our Paper 1 Question 5 Creative Writing Skills lesson. A reminder of the picture here, write a description of a flooded place as suggested by this image. Now, today we're going to change our focus. We looked at light from above in the sky and the river below last lesson. This lesson, we're going to be focusing on the trees.
Now, if you said that to me originally, I would think, what can I say? There's not that much to say about the trees.
Nothing at all to say about the trees.
But then when you think about it, there is an enormous amount to say about the trees.
There is, it's very true. And we're going to show you how to do that today. But to warm us up, we do have to remember that punctuation and sentence structures are really important. And look, this is important for GCSEs, but it's also really important for life. Being able to punctuate well, be heard clearly is really important. So we're going to do a bit of a warm up to start us off with by looking at this paragraph about the trees, funnily enough. And we want you to try and add the following punctuation marks and capital letters to this unpunctuated paragraph. You will need to pause your screen and add the punctuation marks in.
Shall we just give a little bit of guidance on each punctuation mark?
We can do. Would you like to do that?
Yeah, so we know full stop and comma, don't we?
We do know those.
But we also know never, ever, comma, splice.
Ever. What does comma splice mean?
Don't separate two sentences with a comma. Never do that. You can't do that. You can use a comma for a list or a subordinate clause, which is that part in the sentence that doesn't make sense without the rest of the sentence. A dash we talked about a lot last lesson. Yeah. Adding information, creating a pause, having an impact. Now, a semicolon will separate two sentences and might replace words like and, but, because, or two sentences that are very closely linked. For example, it rained all day, semicolon, we couldn't go outside.
Yeah.
Okay. Colon, I've always seen from year 6 and 7 perhaps, that it's used to start a list, but it doesn't have to be.
It doesn't have to be. I kind of think of these as a sign of expanding, explaining, adding more. Here we go.
Impact.
Yeah, absolutely.
The sky opened, colon, the heavens came down.
Yeah.
And then what's that C for?
I'll put that in there for capital letters to remind us about that.
Okay. I'm going to read this to show you what it sounds like without punctuation.
Go on.
Can I breathe through it?
Come on. I know you're old, but
I've got
going.
yoga training. Along the sodden banks of the river, weeping willows dipped their tired limbs into the cool water. It was the end of summer. Their cold leaves had begun to assume edges of gold and red. Soon all would be an autumnal blaze. The winding ooze had burst its banks without warning, suddenly relentless and devastating.
Pause your video and add the punctuation.
You should be able to find a place for all of those punctuation marks.
Okay, welcome back. Would you like to see what the answers are?
Now, this doesn't have to be the definitive answer, but it's our suggestion.
In red here, have a look at how close you are.
Can you read that one properly?
I can. Along the sodden banks of the river, weeping willows dipped their tired limbs into the cool water. It was the end of summer. Their coiled leaves had begun to assume edges of gold and red. Soon all would be an autumn blaze. The winding ooze had burst its banks without warning. Sudden, relentless, and devastating.
So much better with the punctuation. What grade would you give the first paragraph without the punctuation?
Well, as a true fact, you really can't get above a grade 2 with no punctuation, and that's sadly the true story.
Even though it's got lovely language and vocabulary, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter because you are really bottoms out because there's none. I mean, there was no
because
punctuation.
You need both.
You do need both.
And now it has this punctuation in it. What is it?
Well, I'm putting this in higher band.
7, I think.
I think grade 7 at
so
least.
So you've got 5 grades with a range of punctuation.
With a range of punctuation, and also crucially, and this is where it becomes really important, sentences that make sense. So your punctuation might be in a slightly different place because you can make that work here. But what is crucial is that you have sentence structures that make sense, that make your writing clear, and punctuation that is accurately used. It's really important. So we need to bear that in mind with our second paragraph today, because a few of you yesterday, I think punctuation was a real focus area.
Yeah,
actually. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so moving on then, we're looking at the trees, and we'd like you to really focus on the trees today, thinking about some metaphorical language, so using personification and using simile.
Personification is when a non-living thing, I know a tree is a living plant, but it's not a person, it's not human.
Non-human.
A non-human object or thing takes on human attributes. For example, the car could cough or the tree could breathe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we talked yesterday, didn't we, about how we quite like using personification with trees, things like using limbs and skeletons and
fingers and hands.
Yeah, and I think we can see that, we can relate to it, and it helps us to find that connection.
Looking at that tree in the middle that is dark under the rainbow, I was thinking of the concept of it having a rib cage.
Yeah, it kind of looks like that. It's almost got this kind of this central
bony
area.
structure.
Yeah. Quite a solid foundation in the middle there, like our rib cage. Yeah, fabulous. And also similes are really useful here because making comparisons can make your work really come alive. It can really add depth and meaning to it. So what kind of similes could be used here, do you think, Mr. Callahan?
We could talk about the trees being like guardians or soldiers or sentries on guard, because they often form a line, a sort of formation, don't they, together, and they might provide a protective barrier, so they could be on guard.
Yeah, and that's right, because actually, I mean, I wonder if these trees actually have been planted in a line, as often are in parks, or if actually these are following the line of the river, and they're the barrier between the river and the park. Maybe it's a natural line, a natural formation. But yeah, I like that idea of being standing on guard. Should we take a moment? I think we could all take a moment to do this. Can you have a think about how you could use personification and simile here? Maybe just take 2 or 3 minutes to think about some initial ideas. Pause the video for us a moment. Okay, so welcome back. We have got some ideas ourselves here. So let's have a little look.
Steadfast. What does that mean?
What does steadfast mean?
Yeah.
Being reliable,
like
Trusted.
secure.
Secure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Steadfast, the trees remained rooted like guardians of an ancient relic, refusing to submit. Simile in there? How was their personification? And refusing to do something. So personification, because we've given trees limbs,
Yeah.
like body parts, contorted, twisted.
Yeah.
Looking for the light. In the wind, they whispered stories. I like that because actually, if you walk through a park or a tree-lined area, and there's even a light, and you can hear that whispering, rustling sound as if they're chattering and talking to one another. No. And you know what I love about trees, and I always remember from being little, is the idea that you cut down the trunk. Well, let's hope we don't cut down trees, but when you open it, you can see the rings, and that's the age of the tree. Yeah. And if it has hundreds of rings, that's a tree that has so much wisdom and knowledge and has seen so much. I often wonder, what has this tree seen in the past? So it does have stories to tell. Yeah. The tree of life.
This is playing around with your sentries idea.
Yeah, which is a soldier, isn't it? Like a soldier or a guard.
Kind of the watchman, if you like. Still as silent sentries, each willow watched and waited for the flood to abate.
Do you know where I got silent sentries from?
I do, yeah.
Where?
Was it from Exposure?
It is Exposure.
Yeah, that poem. Do you remember that, guys? World War I poetry. All those eons ago. But used nicely here, and you can always do that. You can remember, like we did yesterday with Macbeth, steal away.
Because we've got in that sentence as well, sibilance, which gives it that sort of whisper, that silent whisper. And then the willow watched and waited is assonance, which is when you use vowel sounds to sort of elongate or make longer the sound, so it feels as if time is passing. They're watching and they're waiting. What does it mean to abate?
It means to does it mean to stop or to pull, to come to
a halt?
Come to a halt, but also recede. Come back, recede, go back, isn't it, as well? Okay, so some good examples here that you might want to steal, adapt, try and emulate in your writing. Okay, so this is the main chunk of what we want you to do today. Your second paragraph needs to build on your first, to really think about some of the mood and the tone that you've created in your first paragraph. And we've got a real multitude of different tones and atmospheres created in your opening paragraphs, which is great. So really think about what would make sense for your piece of writing in particular. And we want you to describe the trees, and we really want you to focus on each part of the trees, because as you said at the beginning, what do you mean right about the trees? What's there to say about that?
And I think there's plenty, because first of all, you've got several trees that together in a community. So you could talk about them, and they could be companions, they could have a friendship, perhaps there could be a hostile tree here, an unwelcoming tree. But you've also got the tree from the root upwards, so don't forget those roots in the ground. You've seen them when you walk around Rushmere.
Yeah.
And you can trip over them sometimes on Park Run. So those gnarled roots deep in the ground that are burying, searching, looking for nutrients, looking for water, keeping that tree alive. It's the arteries and the blood flow of that tree. And then you can go to the trunk, which is that solid, strong, powerful base of the tree, and it carries the tree up from the earth into the sky, doesn't it? And you've got bark, sap.
And also in the trunk is the permanence. That's the soul of the tree, if you like, isn't it? It's the age, it's the wisdom.
And that's where the rings are.
So you can talk
about them.
Yeah.
Then the boughs, what's the difference between a bough and a branch?
Is a bough the more substantial?
And then I think the branches come off the bough.
Yeah. So the branches are the more
smaller ones.
Fragile, smaller ones, yeah.
So again, you could think about the body skeletal system of the tree. You could think about the arteries and the veins of the tree. It carries water in the same way we carry blood. So there's that option. And then for leaves, you could be very imaginative. They don't have to be green, You can take them to an autumnal place of gold and saffron, bronze and crimson.
Yeah, and also think about the texture. Then we said coiled earlier, didn't we? Twisted, dry, crackled.
You could draw on your science knowledge and talk about variegated leaves.
You could.
You could talk about osmosis. You could.
You could easily. But look, there is plenty to say here, and even if you just take each of those bullet points as a starting point, you've got loads that you can work with. So what we'd like you to do today is get this second paragraph done. We'd like you to submit your draft to us to have a look at. Remember, these are all building up to a more extended piece of writing that we're going to put together in lesson 4. So make sure you're making your notes really clearly. You can re-watch this video as many times as you like. It's on YouTube, it's on the drive. You can see it as many times as you like. So feel free to go back, to watch things over, to take your time with it. That's what it's there for. Okay? In the meantime, if you've got any problems, you need to message your teachers on the chat and keep talking to us, because we are here for you.
Look on your stream with your class, and your teacher will be there live looking at what's happening and be able to respond to your questions.
Yeah, super. All right. See you lesson 3.